You go through life thinking it's your thoughts that betray you, your fears, your doubts, your emotions. But what if the real danger isn't what's inside you? It's where you place yourself. You scroll through your phone in that same room, walk into that same building, talk to those same people, and slowly, without realizing it, your energy begins to vanish. You start to forget who you are. Not because you're weak, but because some places are. Carl Jung believed that the human psyche is shaped not just by what we carry within, but by what surrounds us. There are environments, both seen and unseen, that can quietly unravel your mind. You won't notice it at first, but over time, your thoughts shift, your confidence fades, your soul dims. In this journey, we'll uncover 7 dangerous places Carl Jung said you must avoid, not to escape life, but to protect your mental strength inside it. Because some places don't just hurt you, they change you. But how do you even begin to recognize these places before they do the damage? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, spent his life studying the hidden forces that shape our minds. He wasn't interested in quick fixes or surface-level solutions. He dug into the soul, the unconscious, the shadow, the archetypes that govern human behavior without us realizing. And one of his most haunting realizations was that we become deeply influenced by the environments we dwell in, often more than we realize. Now think about your daily life. Have you ever entered a space and immediately felt heavy, like the air itself was pressing against your chest? Have you ever left a conversation feeling smaller, quieter, unsure of yourself, without knowing why? It's not always about the people. Sometimes it's about the energy a place holds, the psychological weight it carries. Jung believed that certain spaces hold patterns, unconscious fields of emotion, trauma, and unresolved energy. And when you enter those fields, they start to rewrite you, slowly and subtly. He once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That includes the unconscious influence of the environments you walk through every day. This isn't just about avoiding dangerous streets or dark alleys. The places we're about to explore are psychological landscapes, some real, some symbolic, all powerful. They affect how you think, how you feel, and whether you can remain mentally strong in the face of life's chaos. Let's begin with the first one you might already be standing in, the echo chamber. This is the place where every voice around you sounds like your own, where your opinions, beliefs, fears, even your flaws are mirrored back to you again and again until they feel like truth. You might think you're thinking for yourself, but are you? Or are you just repeating what you've always heard? Carl Jung warned about the dangers of collective thinking, the kind that drowns out individual reflection. He believed that true strength of mind comes from confrontation with the self, not comfort in sameness. But the echo chamber makes that confrontation nearly impossible. It gives you the illusion of certainty while quietly robbing you of growth. Think about your social media feed, the accounts you follow, the conversations you entertain. Are they challenging you or just confirming what you already believe? In the echo chamber, difference is seen as a threat. Curiosity dies. The mind becomes rigid, and with rigidity comes fragility, because anything unfamiliar becomes terrifying. Jung saw this as a form of spiritual stagnation, a space where the psyche no longer evolves because it's never allowed to stretch. And it doesn't have to be digital. It could be your circle of friends, a classroom, even a family gathering where only certain opinions are allowed to exist. You begin to feel safe there, but safe doesn't always mean healthy. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you truly listened to something that made you uncomfortable and sat with it? Mental strength isn't about always being right. It's about being willing to be wrong and growing from it. The echo chamber silences that growth. It traps you in a loop of your own voice. And if you stay too long, you start to forget how to think in any other way. And once you've forgotten how to think in new ways, you're left vulnerable to the next place, one that looks like ambition but feels like despair. The comparison arena. This is the space where your worth is measured by how you stack up against everyone else, where every glance becomes a silent competition, where someone else's success automatically feels like your failure. And no matter how much you achieve, it never feels like enough. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." But what about the unlived lives we measure ourselves against? The ones we scroll past every day, the ones that aren't even real. In the comparison arena, you're not just watching others, you're absorbing them, their lifestyles, their timelines, their highlight reels. And slowly, you start editing your own life to match theirs. Not because it brings you joy, but because it feels like survival. Have you ever achieved something you were proud of, only to feel empty because someone else did it louder, bigger, faster? This place weakens your mind by shifting your focus outward. Instead of becoming more of yourself, you become less of others. You compare your depth to their surface, your real time to their best moments. Jung emphasized the importance of individuation, the process of becoming uniquely you. But in this arena, individuation is crushed under the pressure to conform, to keep up, to win in a game that was never yours to play. And the most dangerous part, the more you compare, the more disconnected you become from what you actually want. You lose sight of your values, your inner compass, your joy. So ask yourself this, is the life you're chasing even yours, or did you borrow it from someone else in the arena? Mental strength isn't found by winning comparisons, it's found by stepping out of the ring entirely. It's only when you step out of the ring that you begin to see clearly. But clarity can be short-lived, especially when you enter the next place, one that doesn't ask you to compete, but to perform. The masked circle. This is the space where everyone wears a version of themselves that looks acceptable, likable, polished. A place where appearances matter more than authenticity, where being real feels risky and vulnerability is a foreign language. Carl Jung spoke often about the persona, the social mask we wear to adapt to the expectations of others. He didn't say it was evil, but he warned that if you forget you're wearing it, you risk becoming it. Think about the environments where you feel the need to shrink parts of yourself, where you laugh at things that don't feel funny, agree with ideas you don't believe, stay silent when something inside you screams to speak. That's the masked circle. It could be your workplace, a friendship group, even a relationship where love is conditional on who you pretend to be. At first, it feels harmless. You tell yourself, it's just easier this way. But over time, the mask hardens. And the longer you wear it, the more distant your real self becomes. You stop asking who you are, because it no longer feels safe to find out. Jung believed that true mental strength comes from integration, bringing your shadow, your flaws, your hidden truths into the light. But in this circle, anything that doesn't fit the image is pushed further into darkness. Have you ever walked away from a group of people and felt exhausted, not because they drained you, but because you had to keep performing? Wearing the mask too long doesn't just hide you, it isolates you from others and from yourself. And here's the quiet tragedy. The more you blend in, the more you disappear. And sometimes that disappearance doesn't start out in the world. It begins at home, the silent home. This is the place where love is assumed but never spoken, where feelings are buried beneath routine, where conversations hover at the surface and silence becomes the unspoken rule. To the outside world, it might look stable, even peaceful. But inside, it's a quiet erosion, a place where emotional needs are unmet, unexpressed, and eventually unfelt. Carl Jung believed that the emotional patterns we experience early in life form the foundation of our psyche. If those patterns are built in silence, in emotional absence, the result is not strength, but suppression. And suppressed emotion doesn't disappear. It simply festers, waiting for a moment of weakness to break through. Have you ever lived in a space where you couldn't express what you felt, where being open meant being shut down, ignored, or misunderstood? You learn to hold it all in, to smile when you're hurting, to cope instead of connect. And that coping becomes your identity. But coping isn't healing, and silence isn't peace. In the silent home, you become skilled at pretending everything's fine. But beneath the surface, your mind is constantly negotiating between what you feel and what you're allowed to show. That dissonance wears you down. It's hard to be mentally strong when you've never been emotionally safe. Jung taught that healing begins with expression, with turning toward your inner world, not away from it. But in this place, expression is seen as weakness. Vulnerability becomes taboo, and little by little, the silence outside becomes the silence within. So ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly heard without having to raise your voice? Now imagine the opposite. Imagine being in a place so loud, externally or internally, that you can't even hear yourself think. That's the next place, and it's far more common than you think. The chaotic space. This is the environment of constant stimulation, the one where noise replaces meaning, where distractions pile up so high you forget what stillness feels like. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." But how can you look inside when you're being pulled in every direction? This space isn't always physical. It can be mental, emotional, a life so packed with to-do lists, obligations, and background noise that your inner voice gets drowned out. You move fast, you respond quickly, you stay busy, because slowing down feels dangerous. Why? Because in silence, the truth might speak. Have you ever filled your day with things to do, not because they mattered, but because you couldn't stand to be alone with your thoughts? In the chaotic space, stillness becomes threatening. Rest feels like laziness. Reflection feels like a waste of time. But the mind isn't built to sprint endlessly. It needs rhythm, moments to absorb, digest, and realign. When that rhythm is broken, so is your clarity. And this chaos doesn't just exhaust you, it fragments you. You become scattered, unfocused, irritable. You start to mistake movement for progress and noise for relevance. Jung believed that meaning is found in depth, not speed, but the chaotic space convinces you otherwise. It seduces you with urgency, then leaves you empty. So the question is, if the noise suddenly stopped, would you recognize the sound of your own soul? Or would it be unfamiliar, like a stranger you once knew? That's where the next place takes root, a place not outside of you, but deep within, perhaps the most deceptive of them all, the abandoned self. This isn't a room you walk into, it's the space created when you stop listening to your own needs, your own instincts, your own truth. You abandon yourself, not all at once, but gradually. One compromise here, one ignored feeling there, until what remains is a life that no longer reflects who you are. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious holds the parts of ourselves we reject, suppress, or fear. And when we abandon those parts, they don't disappear. They manifest as anxiety, self-sabotage, and even physical illness. Have you ever said yes when everything in you screamed no, stayed in a place, a job, a relationship that hollowed you out because it was easier than facing the unknown? That's what this place demands. Comfort over courage. Numbness over truth. It teaches you to adapt so well to the expectations around you that you lose access to your inner compass. And the hardest part? Most people don't even realize they're in it. They call it being responsible. They call it growing up. But it's not growth if it costs you your soul. Jung spoke often about the process of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are. But you can't begin that journey if you've silenced the voice inside that tells you where to go. So pause and ask yourself, when was the last time you truly checked in? Not with the world, but with you. Are you still in there? Or have you left pieces of yourself behind in exchange for belonging? Because the longer you stay in the place of self-abandonment, the harder it becomes to find your way back. But even when you begin that return, there's one final place that can still trap you. One that exists behind closed mental doors you've never dared to open. The forbidden room. This is the space where your past lives, the one filled with repressed memories, unresolved pain, buried emotions, things you've locked away because they were too heavy, too shameful, too much. Carl Jung believed that every person carries a shadow, the hidden, unconscious parts of ourselves we refuse to face. But what we refuse to face doesn't just sit quietly in the dark. It grows. It influences our behavior, our relationships, even our identity. Have you ever overreacted to something small and then wondered, where did that come from? Or found yourself repeating patterns you swore you'd never fall into again? That's the forbidden room at work. The place you never visit, yet it shapes everything you do. And here's the truth Jung knew well. Whatever you bury will eventually come looking for you. The pain you silence becomes the pain you pass on. And avoidance doesn't erase the past. It only gives it more power. So many people live their entire lives tiptoeing around this room, afraid that if they open the door, they won't be able to handle what's inside. But the longer you avoid it, the more power it has over you. The shadows you deny become the chains you wear. Jung taught that true strength is born from integration, bringing those hidden parts into the light, one truth at a time, not to destroy you, but to make you whole. So ask yourself, what door have you refused to open in your own mind? And more importantly, what part of your healing still waits behind it? Now that you've seen these 7 places, some external, some buried deep within, you might realize you've been living in more than one of them. Maybe you've walked through the echo chamber trying to find your voice. Maybe you've sat quietly in the silent home, longing to be understood. Or maybe you've locked yourself away in the forbidden room, hoping no one would notice the pain still breathing in the corners. But here's what Carl Jung understood so deeply. Healing doesn't begin with perfection. It begins with awareness. And awareness starts with naming what was once hidden. You don't need to escape the world to protect your mind, but you do need to be more intentional about where you place it, about the spaces you enter, the energy you allow, and the parts of yourself you're still afraid to meet. Staying mentally strong isn't about having it all together. It's about having the courage to leave what weakens you, even if that place has become familiar. So I ask you this, which of these places have you spent too much time in, and what would it take for you to walk away? Let me know in the comments. Your story might be the one that helps someone else finally recognize their own. If this resonated with you, don't forget to share it. And remember, your strength isn't built in comfort. It's forged in the choices you make.